Let me turn to Orwell and science again. Orwell paid great attention to science when he was working for the BBC Indian Service. He arranged 12 six-lecture courses based on Bombay and Calcutta University syllabuses. They were broadcast and also published, and 5 of the 12 were devoted to science and 1 to psychology. Many of his speakers were leading figures in their fields: J.D. Bernal, Gordon Child, James Needham, Susan Isaacs. Orwell's experience as a writer, in particular the way what he wrote about the Spanish Civil War was subject to political attack, was something he understood. He was struck, though, that science, supposedly fact-based, or that favourite expression we hear very often nowadays, supposedly fact-based and peer-reviewed, should be subjected to political interference. Hence, countless people think it's scandalous, this is Orwell, countless people think it's scandalous to falsify a scientific textbook, but would see nothing wrong in falsifying a historical fact. The case of Lysenko demonstrated otherwise. The fog of lies and misinformation about even factual, the scientific, showed Orwell knew how destructive was Soviet communism. The role of science in 1984 is highly significant, even if it seems a long way from nature study at St. Cyprian's and dissecting a raven at Eton. The manipulation of even a simple arithmetical equation, 2 + 2 = 5, illustrates how easily facts could be perverted. Just as Lysenko's work depended on the denial of science, so is science denied in 1984, to such an extent that science in the old sense has ceased to exist. In Newspeak, there is no word for science. Thus, in the principles of Newspeak, there was no vocabulary expressing the function of science as a habit of mind or a method of thought, irrespective of particular branches. There was indeed no word for science. Let me turn to Rule 101. For 20 years I've tried to persuade the BBC that Rule 101 is not in Broadcasting House. I made another attempt in a life in letters. You won't find that too easy to read, but it's a letter from a man called Rendell, one of Orwell's bosses, about the setting up of a committee which would be for the Indian Service and to which Orwell would go. In fact, he was chairman of subcommittees of that committee. This is Rendell's letter of the 16th of October 1941, and it shows that room 101 was in 55 Portland Place. The that block of flats was being used by the BBC at the time. They moved out after a while, and they moved into 200 Oxford Street. And if the 200 seems familiar in a way, if you think of the letters, they look a bit like the letters ZOO, Zoo Animal Farm. It was referred to as Animal Farm by some of the people who lived there. One of those, I knew is now dead, one of those men who worked there in the office next to Orwell told me that. Some of you may have seen the installation by Rachel Whitred of Room 101. This was fashioned from the room in Broadcasting House that the BBC decided was the real place, and it was shown in the Victoria and Albert Museum. There is Rachel Whitred's installation. I did suggest to the V&A a note of explanation that it wasn't really the right place, but that of course was ignored. What was the significance of this room? Well, the worst fate for Orwell was not death by impalement or fire or water. The worst fate was something beloved by the bureaucratic, committee meetings. It's a neat encapsulation of Orwell's humour in unlikely places. He does the same sort of thing by reference to a passage in Latin by Tacitus in Burmese days. This is 1984 in the Polish version. There it is. It's just a little book. You see how small the type is. Bratus 2, the publisher, you can see at the bottom of the top left-hand page, is meant to be the publisher, and it means brotherhood. Brotherhood, in 1984, I quote, an underground network of conspirators dedicated to the overthrow of the state. If you were found with a copy of that little book, it was 10 years imprisonment. If you were found having written out 1984 or any other banned book, it was also the Gulag. You may not have seen these stamps. These are the stamps of the Solidarity Underground movement, and they are obviously a cartoon of Orwell, virtually worshipped in Poland to this day. They were sent me by Bartek Sporski, who worked with Lech Kaczynski, the president who was killed in an air crash quite recently, and Bartek is the translator of Orwell into Polish. If I can go on just a little while and say something about the production of volumes 10 to 20, the essays and letters and so forth, of 1984. I don't know whether you can read that, but this is a sort of timeline I've drawn up to give you some idea of progress or lack of it. Publication took 16 years. The main task was locating material, but production was hindered by constant changes at publishers. Second Warburg was taken over 8 times, and not always by other publishers. They were taken over by a bus company once. At least they printed timetables and tickets. Another time they were taken over by the London Rubber Company, which had a different kind of product altogether. There were changes of management. Tom Rosenthal was followed by Peter Gross, he by David Godwin, he by Dan Franklin, then Max Eilenberg. And Rowena Skelton Wallace saw the volumes through to the very end. During a brief excursion to New York, when everything was shifted there to be produced by Horkop Brace Jovanovich, the late Roberta Layton proved very veritable tower of strength. But many editorial changes took place which hindered progress. Time after time I'd be asked to explain why we were producing these books. Many good people fell by the wayside, to the best being Mark Bryant and Annika Alvarez. Ian Angus, my wife and I, undertook all the proofreading, never mind everything else, without any help from the publishers. Until the last 2 books, the 2 that are now being on sale, where Brian Everett, the new editor, house editor, provided a proofreader, for which I'm incredibly thankful.